You know, we are, as Peter said, in a unique new budget environment. Really not that different than the late '90s where budgets went down, but very similar. And it's interesting that as we went through the late '90s, some of us in the room, Rick Skinner and Earl and Joe Hamill, came together and built the SATCOM architecture that we're seeing actually deployed today in advanced HF and WGS. And it was built, of course, for the exact next war that we were going to fight because we knew exactly what we were going to fight next. Not really. But what we've seen is that those systems were pretty adaptable, but not as adaptable as we necessarily wanted them. And other threats are evolving over time, not just budget threats. I've had some interesting conversations over the last several weeks with different COCOMs, particularly if you talk to AFRICOM or SouthCom, and you talk about the big programs and the resilience of those systems, or the ability of those systems to meet missions for those areas that they weren't necessarily designed to operate in as we built the requirements documents for those systems. And so, you know, they're looking for answers, and one of the answers that I think industry's come up with, clearly SFC through the BAA process that they have going on right now has come up with, is this disaggregated idea. And so what does it bring you? It brings you potentially cheaper platforms, potentially. It gives you clearly more systems to operate, to be more flexible to mission needs as the missions change. Much like Peter said, we don't know 15 years out what we're going to be fighting in 15 years. We don't know in 2 years what we're going to be fighting. You know, who would have predicted the Arab Spring? Who would predict a requirement to support an evacuation in Central Africa? Who would predict necessarily a tsunami event in Asia? So the systems that we build for the future need to look at that. We've tried the Swiss Army knife approach over the years. Some of us were involved in the TSAT program. Some of us were involved in killing the TSAT program. But you know, that was a valiant attempt to build a satellite that could do a lot of things, and that ultimately the thought process was could save money over the long term by having this multiple use satellite. There's not a lot of desire in Congress for those kind of programs, not over a long term that those programs take. And so the disaggregated architectures allow us to have a way to build programs quicker, to keep the momentum going on programs, to allow multiple different mission sets to get up kind of simultaneously but on separate platforms, and allows us to break apart this interdependency on the aggregate satellites. You know, so, there's an interdependency of cost, there's an interdependency of mission on some of these big platforms. So if you're building a platform that's for a strategic guy and a tactical guy, and they need to reposition a satellite, who wins? I guarantee it's probably not the tactical guy. We hear over and over again as we visit different COCOMs around the world that, oh, we just don't have a priority, so we can't get the satellites we need. And that's a real problem for them. And so this is an attempt by industry and the industrial base and the acquisition community, I really believe, to look at ways to get more capability to those places that don't always get it. My son's been over to two different combat tours as a National Guard E5 infantry guy. So he's a down in the dirt kind of kid, but the amount of space resource that he uses has absolutely amazed me. But he's also complained that he doesn't get what he always needs. And his last mission was supporting doing some stuff with some special units as an infantry soldier, and when they needed to get some resources to support a mission, they weren't able to get it because they weren't high enough on the pecking order. There wasn't enough assets in theater to support what they needed. So they kind of went in blind, and it happened on several different occasions, he told me. A disaggregated architecture with the right capabilities can help alleviate some of that. help reallocate mission sets, allow you to have more flexibility, and allow you to leverage investments we made on bigger satellites over a fleet of many different ones, so that more users get access. Are they more cost efficient? I think there's studies to prove one way or the other. It depends on what side you're on. I think that cost efficiency will come into the disaggregated architectures over time, particularly as we build more of something. And it allows us, instead of these big R&D investments, to kind of make the R&D upgrades to systems in a more regimented approach. As technology hits the right TRL level, we don't have to wait 15 years. We can wait to 5 years. We can wait to 3. Whatever the refresh rate is on those systems. The opportunity also gives us some chance to look at some new acquisition practices. I know in several of the programs of record today, WGS for one, from our perspective, we've changed the way we manage those programs, and we're very commercial-like, and we're able to wring cost out of those programs. I think that with these smaller, more disaggregated architectures, you have a chance of doing that as a habitual matter of course. And what I mean by that, if you look at some of these big programs, I'll throw out the one that our company, WGS, when that program started, there were about 300 some badged DoD folks helping the program. Over time, we've been able to get that down to a much more reasonable number, way under 100. But that could become the norm and save a lot of money just on the acquisition side for DoD as they build these smaller systems. They won't, if you encourage DoD on the acquisition side to adapt more commercial-like ways of buying and monitoring programs, and that becomes part of the norm on these smaller satellites, you'll see a significant cost savings. On the requirement side, requirements are driven by doctrine, and frankly, right now, from my look at what DoD is doing with air-sea battle, and the Army's not really sure what happens after Afghanistan, I would say that doctrine is up in the air. So you have to, if you want to continue to build systems that are going to support warfighters going forward, they have to be flexible enough to mature with the doctrine, to actually meet the future doctrine, whatever that is. And that doctrine seems to change, at least for DoD, on about every 5 to 10 year cycle anyway. So the systems that we're building, if they're disaggregated, smaller, can be adapted as that doctrine changes. Again, just to kind of wrap it up and turn it over, there's no one system approach to this. There's going to be a need for some big satellites, a big need for a more disaggregated approach. But the key is that we have to find ways that are more responsive, more resilient, and more cost effective as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.